everyone! In this video, I'm going to show you how to make an agenda for a meeting using Google Drive. And you're going to see the way that I structure my agendas. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to do it the exact same way for the meetings that you are facilitating. This is just a suggestion, and I found that it works quite well for the meetings that my teams participate in. So let's go over to Google Drive, and we're in the protest folder here, and we have another folder that is called meeting minutes. So if you don't quite know how to get to this in Google Drive, we can make a video in the future that explains the really basic parts of Google Drive, but I'm going to assume for this video that you have an understanding of how to find a folder in your drive. So we're going to go to meeting minutes, and we're going to open that up, and we're going to scroll to the very bottom, to the last agenda that's been created. And that's really easy to tell because we have dated all of them in the same format, and so Google Drive can sort it, basically alphabetically or numerically in from smallest to largest. So that's easy to find the last meeting. We are going to right-click on that agenda, and we are going to make a copy of it. So this is the best way that I find to make agendas for meetings, especially unless it's the first meeting that you've ever had. And so now you have a copy of the exact same document that you had last week. I'm going to open that up. And the first thing that I'm going to do, I apologize for my slow computer, is you can see that the title has now been changed. I am going to edit the title. I'm going to remove copy of, and I am going to create it for the next week. I'm going to change the date. So we will meet a week later, and that would be on August 14th. So I'm also going to change it up here, and we had who was taking attendance, facilitating, etc. This is from the last meeting, so I'm just going to delete that. Ooh. So now you have all of the notes that you took from the last meeting, and you don't need to keep those anymore, most likely, because you will still have a copy of last week's if you ever needed to reference it. So I'm going to go and basically delete all of the commentary, all of the notes that we go by section. So you can see that the first section in the agenda is announcements. This just gives people the opportunity to share anything that came up for them really briefly that's related to the meeting. Then we have a list of key documents here, which we don't go through every meeting, but it's just there for reference because sometimes you have to take a look at it in the middle of the meeting, and it's easier if it's linked in the agenda. The third thing we do every meeting is following up on our action items. We take our action items in a task manager called Wunderlist, which means we don't actually need to write them down. When it comes to the meeting, we will bring up Wunderlist and just go through them. So we don't need to have this anymore. That was just a note from last time, so we can delete that. After we've done announcements and our action items, now we come to the discussion, which is the bulk of the meeting. Last time, we reviewed our OKRs, which is our objectives, and we do that once a month because it was the first meeting of the month, so we don't need to do that next month. That's just something that we do in this specific working group. You might do it weekly in your working group, but we don't need to do that next week for protest, so I'm going to delete that. We have this standing item in our protest team. You don't need to worry about what it means. It's about the Attorney General, so I'm just going to delete it, and all the notes from last time, we can just keep it in our agenda. Then last week, we debriefed the Costco protest, and we don't need to do that because that was a one-time deal. We don't need to debrief it every week, so I'm actually going to delete this entire section. Now we had the Whole Foods teach-in, and we actually had the Whole Foods teach-in happen in between the two meetings, so instead of now talking about planning it, we can talk about debrief. We can debrief that. We can delete that. Then we had Jacqueline come to our meeting to talk about a protest that she's organizing, but she's actually not in the working group, and she's not going to keep coming back. She just wanted kind of a one-time discussion. So again, that doesn't need to be talked about. I'm going to delete that. Petaluma Progressive Festival is something that we're going to, and we do want to keep talking about that because it hasn't happened yet, so I'll just delete the notes and keep it on the agenda. And that's the same thing for the Convergence March. We need to keep talking about it, and we haven't done it yet, so we just need to keep it on the agenda, but we can delete the notes. And there's one other thing, that maybe came up in the week. For example, we had an idea to do a protest at Whole Foods on August 24th for World Day for the End of Speciesism. So I'm going to add that to the agenda. And in protest working group, I like to have the order of events kind of be in the order of the actions, what dates coming, what actions are happening before the others. So I know that the Petaluma Progressive Festival, I just know this is on August 25th, so I'm just going to write Whole Foods protest, brainstorm, and I'll put my name beside it, and I'll say we need 10 minutes for that. And so actually you can see here that we have these little time markers, and I find those really helpful in agendas because it means that you have a set parameter for how long you're going to talk about something and prevent someone from really going off on a tangent. And if they do, you can bring them back and say, hey, look, we only actually have 5 minutes to talk about this, and we want to keep on schedule. And then it doesn't seem like you're just being a jerk. You really did set up the agenda that way. And so we know that we have about up to 50 minutes for our discussion items because it takes us about 5 minutes to get started and go through our action items. And then it also takes us 5 minutes to kind of recap our action items at the end. So I want to make sure that whatever we're doing here doesn't add up to more than 50 minutes. Of course, it's fine if it's less because you can always end the meeting early. So then after the discussion items in the agenda, you would have an item to recap the action items, which just means whatever action items you took during the meeting, you would make sure that people remember that they have to do those. And then we quickly talk about the next facilitator and who that would be because we rotate facilitators in the protest meeting, that you don't need to do that. So I think that's the basics, and now here you go. You have your agenda for the next meeting that was basically just a copy of what you did before, except for you deleted a lot of the comments, you deleted some things that were no longer relevant, and you added discussion topics that were relevant. I think that most people get stuck when they think about what do I actually put on the agenda. So for something like protest team, the basics is you put the things on the agenda that happened last week that we need to debrief, and you add things on the agenda that are coming up. But you also want to think big picture and add things in the agenda that are maybe conversations about what types of protests we should be doing or how we can advance our objectives of winning the right to rescue for protests like that. And you don't necessarily have to do that every week, but that is really important to always be forward thinking and not just be week by week thinking about what's happening, but always thinking about what's happening in the future. So now that you have your agenda, you can share it with your team. So you can go here and share by emailing it out to people or getting a shareable link. However, if you do have everyone who you want to share this with already having access to the folder, you can just copy this link here and send it out to people, and there is your agenda.